Welcome into another exciting episode of Out of Bounds, alongside with John Luck. I'm Brian Berard.
Exciting?
Exciting, yeah. We took a little 2-week hiatus as we were at the high school. Well, most of us were at the high school last week helping out with the production, but John decided to blow us off.
Why don't you tell the whole story, Brian?
Because that doesn't help my case, that's why. If it doesn't help my side, I don't want to tell it. That's how we do it here. So we'll get back to the sports thing, but first, as a reminder, you can watch us anytime online at btvaccess.com and on YouTube by going to youtube.com, searching BTV Access Corporation. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/BTVOB, and you can follow us on Twitter at BTVOB. So we're going to start off with the Boston Celtics, John. The last time we spoke, they were up 3-1 against the Philadelphia 76ers, which felt like eons ago. So just give me a quick recap of that Sixers and Celtics series.
So I think the Sixers and Celtics series, Boston learned that to be in the playoffs, you need to have a deep team. That's what we saw at Philadelphia. They were getting smoked in the first couple games, but the bench players, T.J. McConnell, he stepped up. He eventually started in the series, which really made things a little bit more difficult for the Celtics. He was a quicker player. You throw J.J. Redick in there, it makes it really difficult. But Joel Embiid proved that he's still probably a couple years away from being a true superstar. Ben Simmons proved that he's still probably about 3 or 4 years away from being a true superstar. Could LeBron James help? I don't know. There's still a lot of time to decide that. But Philadelphia, they're probably a superstar or two shy of being in the real NBA Finals picture.
Well, to me, it was kind of like Toronto Raptors kind of feeling. They weren't mentally prepared. They're just kind of mentally a weak team. And I think the one win that we've seen the Celtics win on the road this year was in Philadelphia. So I just think it was kind of, they weren't quite ready yet. And I think, John, you hit the nail on the head. You're kind of a piece or two maybe away. You got to trust the process, though, John.
A LeBron James away, maybe.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the Celtics and the Cavaliers Eastern Conference Finals. They're now 4 games in, and surprise, surprise, every home team has won in this series. The series is tied at 2. But really, as you see the results on the screen now, I mean, the first 3 games were just absolute blowouts, and Game 4 was a close game, 111-102 for the Celtics. And Game 5, of course, is the 23rd at 8:30 back home at TD Garden. So, John, what are your takes, on the first 4 games of this series?
Well, you saw that slide with all the Celtics-Cavs games on it. The Western Conference is just as bad. The entire conference finals has been decided, with the exception of Game 4 last night, by 10 points or more. But as far as Game 4 went, there were a lot of warning signs, I think, for the Boston Celtics, and one of them is Jaylen Brown early on. You look at the first 6 quarters played in Cleveland, so Game 3 in the first half of Game 4, he only scored 10 points. He was pulled from the game and basically benched for most of the first half because he gave up a lot of turnovers. He had 3 blocked shots from Kyle Korver, who's 37 years old, which is ridiculous.
Ageless wonder.
He missed dunks. I go back to that last possession of the first quarter. He was supposed to hold the ball at half court, get some movement going on, but he went right in for the dunk, missed it with 12 seconds left, which allowed Cleveland an opportunity to put a basket on the board. But that's one issue. The other issue is there was a lot of me ball. We hear there's no I in team, but there's me in team. There were a lot of possessions where they didn't pass the ball or maybe got up to 2. The way the Celtics offense is built, for a good possession that ends in points, maybe 3 or more passes, try and get some switches going on, and a lot of quick shots within the first 5 or 6 seconds of the shot clock. Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier, Marcus Morris, Jaylen Brown just throwing up bricks. The Cavs just throwing the ball literally down the court. That Kevin Love to LeBron James shot, I thought that was probably the death shot for the Celtics early on.
See, the thing to me is, I want to say I'm kind of surprised that the Celtics won, but in the NBA, I think the home team wins, 75-80% of the time at home? That's asinine to me.
But it's not the fact that the Celtics won at home. You go back to Game 1. The Celtics beat Cleveland. They defeated Cleveland mentally, physically, on the scoreboard. You went in, or you hosted the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James. I understand the supporting cast for LeBron isn't what it used to be, but the Celtics came out with a second-year player in Jaylen Brown that's really starting to form into a starter. Jason Tatum, who at this time last year was getting ready for the draft, and Terry Rozier, who was in mop-up duty after Isaiah Thomas. So I think it's surprising that the Celtics won the first 2 in the Garden the way they did.
Like I said, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's to me, and it's kind of like the 08 run that the Celtics had 10 years ago, is just win every home game. That's all you really need to do. And, and John, I asked you a couple weeks ago when we last, had a show, said, realistically, how many games can the Celtics win this series? You said 1, maybe 2. Well, they won the first 2 games pretty convincingly. And now in Game 5, I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that the Celtics must win Game 5. But to me, I'm not surprised that both home teams won. And it was an absolute butt whipping in the first 3 games. And we saw in the first 2 games there in Boston. I mean, Cleveland, they didn't care. They weren't competing. I mean, there were so many wide open shots that the Celtics were taking and making. We heard on the broadcast, you go, it's not like you're on the back-to-back of, in the regular season, and, the second game is on the road. This is the Eastern Conference Finals. You get a day off in between every game. You get 2 days off if you have to travel because you got to pamper these people. Not like baseball. They said let's just get this show on the road. But you just saw that they gave up and they said, you know what, we're going to win every game at home. And to me, I feel like LeBron James can come into Boston and win a Game 7. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But I'm not surprised to say the least bit that every home team has won. So I said that Game 5 is a must-win. Do you think Game 5 is a must-win for the Celtics?
Well, Game 5 is a must-win. You look at the way the schedule breaks down, and the last thing I think you want to do is be down 3-2. You go to Cleveland, Ohio on a Friday night when God knows what the people of Cleveland are going to be doing for 3.5 hours before the game. They're going to be getting all lubed up and ready to go and make some noise and make that environment very difficult. That's the issue for the Celtics. They're a young team, so a lot of their offense is based on communication. You make a lot of noise, it's very difficult to scream across the floor, and LeBron James throws his arm up and goes for a dunk.
See, to me, I don't understand how teams can play completely different when you're on your home gym. I get that there's going to be some difference, maybe mostly in your confidence, but it's like you're watching 2 completely different teams when you play in Boston and then when you play in Cleveland. I don't know if it's a hustle thing, I don't know if it's an energy thing, or if it's just, what's the point of even trying on the road? It's just not going to help. I mean, and the thing that really boggles my mind is you see the ref, assignments that you get for the games. And John, I remember telling you Scott Foster was ref in Game 4, and you go, oh, come on, not again. And you really shouldn't have that reaction, but you do have it in the NBA.
No, and I mean, I'm getting garbage for this. I call myself a level-headed green teamer, which apparently I'm being told I'm not.
No.
But the Game 4 loss, you can go ahead and blame the officials if you want, but in the second half, I saw maybe 3 questionable calls. And at that point, you look at the difference, it was 8. That would have added up to 6 points. The Cavaliers still would have won the game. The first half, you shouldn't be down by 19 points at least in the first half, 2 games in a row. The reason that the Cavaliers schooled you on the Cavaliers floor is because they got a lot of movement. They made it so Terry Rozier, little itty-bitty Terry Rozier, had to defend LeBron James. When you have that matchup, give me LeBron James and the Cavs any day of the week. But the reason the Celtics are losing these games isn't because of the officiating. Granted, it was stupid having 15 fouls in the third quarter, but I think in the breakdown, as far as fouls go, it was like 22-19 or something like that. The Celtics got more calls than the Cavaliers. It wasn't the officiating that was the problem. It was the Celtics playing garbage basketball in Games 3 and Game 4. Game 5, they have to get their head out of their butt and actually play a basketball game.
All right, so let's say if it does pan out and the home team wins and you get to Game 7, do you think LeBron James can come into the TD Garden and win Game 7?
Yes. The only thing that would stop that is, do you have to have LeBron James, just LeBron James on the floor? Do we have a repeat of Game 1? Or do you have Kyle Korver coming up shooting out of his mind? Do you have George Hill coming up helping out LeBron James? LeBron James has proven at this stage of his career, he can't just come into the TD Garden and win a game at a whim. He actually has to hustle, and he's at the age now, and I think the Celtics are at the stage now, where team basketball is going to beat LeBron James, but if LeBron James can get 10 points, 15 points from somebody else, the Cavaliers win.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that Cleveland would come into Boston and win a Game 7 rather than Boston going into Cleveland winning a Game 7. But nonetheless, Game 5 at the TD Garden, and I think John and I both agree, it's a must-win game for the Boston Celtics. So we saw that the coaches had their coaches vote, and they voted that Brad Stevens was not the coach of the year. As a matter of fact, he got a nice goose egg for Coach of the Year. Now the Associated Press, I believe, has their shot at saying who the Coach of the Year is.
They're the real voters.
Brad Stevens is a finalist for the Coach of the Year. So, John, is Brad Stevens a Coach of the Year in the NBA?
Well, you go back to the final thought I had a couple weeks ago. It was based on this. In my eyes, Brad Stevens is the Coach of the Year because a lot of the team's success is predicated on the decisions and the play calling that Brad Stevens has. Name me another team that would have Marcus Morris in the starting 5 Aaron Baines in the starting 5, a rookie, Jaylen Brown, who, depending on the night, doesn't have his head in the game, can still come out and get his team to the conference finals of game possibly 6 or 7. Brad Stevens is the reason the Celtics have gotten this far 2 years in a row. He got hosed, I think, last year. This year I gave my reason. Dwayne Casey, the guy who the NBA coaches voted, got canned. Quinn Snyder, I think, is a threat, but he actually had all-star caliber players on his team. The Celtics lost Gordon Hayward within the first 5-6 minutes of the season. They had Kyrie at 75, maybe 80% for half the season. After that, you kind of had to think on your feet, and I think a lot of decisions that Brad has made him Coach of the Year caliber.
Now, do you think it's that great, coaching that Brad Stevens has, or is it the Eastern Conference is just god awful? Is that the reason why they got this far? Because I'm leaning towards, I think it's the Eastern Conference just being awful.
Well, you can make a case for that, but you look at the upper echelon teams in the NBA. They hung around with Toronto. They've hung around with Cleveland. They can hang around with a lot of teams that maybe play a different type of basketball, but Brad Stevens has that moniker. It's always singles, not home runs. They can be down by 50. He says hit singles, not home runs. He keeps his teams at ease as far as the mental state of the Celtics goes. Does it help against a team like Charlotte? Maybe. Does it help against a team like Miami? Maybe. But I think a lot of it does have to do with the coaching style of Brad Stevens. He scouts out these other teams. He has these after timeout plays that mostly work. So why wouldn't it be Brad Stevens' coaching style? Now,
there was a timeout he called, I believe, in the third or fourth quarter of last night's game, and they came up with such a great play that they ran out the shot clock. That's always what you want to see in your Coach of the Year, who also has one postseason win this year, I believe. Now, like I said, I know that the home team always wins, but if you want me to believe that you're Coach of the Year, you have to win at least more than one game on the road in the postseason. I think Game 4 was ripe for the taking for the Celtics, but you saw players it's just taking dumb shots. Don't you think the Coach of the Year would say, hey, let's not play this stupid style of basketball, let's play our style?
You can only say it to a player so many times before the idiot just goes and launches it.
How come you're able to play that style at home, but you can't play that style on the road?
It comes down to the players. You can only coach so far. It comes down to the players on the court.
Exactly, he can't coach on the road then. Why would I want him as Coach of the Year if he can't coach on the road?
Who do you want as your Coach of the Year? Dwayne Casey?
I'm like, here's the thing. I don't know who the Coach of the Year is in the NBA. You know why? Because the coach means nothing in the NBA. Legit means nothing in the NBA.
Okay, yeah. How's Cleveland's coach doing? I mean,
LeBron James? He's doing pretty good. He's tied at series 2-2.
How about that stupid shot? You have the referee here. You have LeBron James here. You have Ty Lue sitting on his butt, just kicking back and relaxing. Yeah, that's a great Coach of the Year.
I want to be that coach.
I'm sure you do.
Oh my God, you get paid millions of dollars just go play.
Aren't you the coach of your softball team or something?
I am not. No, I wouldn't be trusted with that.
You just sit in the dugout and just.
I just sit in the dugout and just watch people do good while I don't do good.
Just swing and miss?
Yeah, well, I don't swing and miss. I don't do that. All right, well, we'll get back on the topic here. So we've talked about the Boston Celtics. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the Boston Red Sox, and the United States Supreme Court has decided to let some sports betting happen. So don't go anywhere. More Out of Bounds right after this.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Okay. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Out of Bounds, alongside with John Luck and Brian Berard. Had some spirited debates about basketball and the Coach of the Year. Now we'll try and tone it down a little bit with some baseball talk.
Tony Town, what is this, bedtime magic or something?
Well, we're getting fired up. I know.
We totally had to get fired up because apparently we put our director to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk about some baseball now as Boston Red Sox are still technically tied for first in the American League East, but since the Yankees have played less games, they technically get to go on top of the Red Sox on the American League East standing, as you see right there. And it's pretty much blown out of proportion there. And I think 3 for 5 there, the Rays, Blue Jays, and Orioles have no shot really of coming back, especially the Orioles, unless if some sort of biblical thing happens.
Like an 11-game lead in the last month of the season?
I don't think that's going to happen because, the chicken and beer stuff.
Right?
The chicken and beer stuff, all right? This is a sober team, John. Sober team. So, now that we're going to try and get back on, John, you're trying to throw us off the rails here, all right?
I'm not the host anymore, so
You're trying to throw this off the rails, all right?
Yeah.
Let's get this back on track. Boston Red Sox lead the American League in pretty much every statistical category offensively that you can imagine. J.D. Martinez is hitting the cover off the ball. Mookie Betts is hitting the cover off the ball. Mitchie Fourbags is hitting the cover off the ball. John, what do you make of the offense so far? Because they started off hot. They kind of went into their lull. I think they were at 12-12 at one point in the season. They're starting to warm back up a little bit. What do you make of the Red Sox offenses the last week or so?
Well, getting back to the records for a second, remember they started the season 17-2 or something ridiculous like that. But since that start, they're only 15-13. And we thought that this was going to happen, maybe plateau a little bit after a hot start like that. But the one player I think that surprised me the most has been J.D. Martinez. The fact that he's been able to hit the cover off the ball after a relatively slow start. Tied for first in the majors in home runs, ironically enough, with Mookie Betts. So I think as far as your offense goes, Martinez and Betts, I think they're probably going to be your Ortiz, Ramirez from back in the heyday. And if they can keep it going, they're a legitimate threat, I feel like, for the American League.
Now, I'll admit this. I really didn't care for J.D. Martinez when they first got him. I didn't know how you're going to fit him in there with Mitch Moreland and Hanley Ramirez in that lineup. I still think you need to get Mitch Moreland in there a little bit more, but that means you have to put Hanley Ramirez as a DH, and we've all seen the train wreck that Hanley Ramirez is when he's a DH. So I give credit to Alex Cora for keeping the hot bats in there and rotating them in there pretty well. I think that because he's able to get Mitch Moreland in there a little bit more, this offense is starting to peak a little bit more. I think when they kind of went through that lull, it was you didn't really know how to put Mitch Moreland in there, but I think ever since he started doing this rotation, it's worked out very well for them. Now, we've had some great offense also from Andrew Benintendi over the last few weeks and also stealing bases. They're getting motion on the base paths from him. What do you make of Andrew Benintendi? Because he did start out kind of slow this year, and he's kind of proven his worth a little bit now over the past few weeks.
Well, I don't think he's been hitting the cover off the ball. I haven't checked his stats.
Well, I think he has, 2 or 3 home runs in as many games?
But a lot of his offense, I feel like, is predicated on the small ball, the big singles, the big doubles, the stolen bases we talked about, the speed on the base paths. And I feel like that's where the Red Sox are going to get a lot of their runs this season. Now, I think they lead the league or something like that in home runs. But their offense this year is going to be based on small ball. Can you get a runner to go from second to home? And with speed like him, Holt, JBJ, who we'll probably get to in a minute, your favorite player.
Love him.
With speed like that on the base paths, the Red Sox can get some runs. The only issue is how do you balance it with the hard hitting of Betts and Martinez? Will that come down a little bit as well?
Now we'll talk about the lulls in the lineup, especially the catcher position. Sandy Leon, he's starting to warm up a little bit. Christian Vasquez got awful this year. I think Vasquez is still a sub-200 average. I think Sandy Leon finally got his above 200. What do you think the Red Sox have to do at that catcher position to get a little bit more production out of the offense?
It's very difficult to get a hard-hitting catcher. I mean, Buster Posey might be the outlier there, but as far as your lineup goes, usually the catcher is the worst statistical batter. But as far as Christian Vasquez goes, you have to balance because he's great with the pitching staff, but offensively he's terrible. Sandy Leon, they're trying to phase him out a little bit to get Vasquez some more games after signing that big contract extension. But as far as Vasquez goes, I just think you have to ride the waves. Last year he hit 290, 5 home runs and 32 RBIs. Right now that looks like a good season for him. But, small goals here. Try and get the batting average above 200. Try and get double-digit RBI. Really, I think the Red Sox have Vasquez in there just for his defense and, getting in tune with the pitching staff, because I feel like the pitching staff for the Red Sox has improved, and a lot of that can be thanks to the play of Christian Vasquez.
Now, another awkward spot that we found out about a week or so ago is the agent of Blake Swihart has requested a trade for his client, and How do you deal with something like that in the clubhouse where maybe the player requested it, but he's going to throw it on to his agent? How do you deal with something like that where you now that's public information, the team has to kind of deal with it? It's like, hey, nice to see you. Like, how do you deal with that in the clubhouse?
It's been going on for years. Players complaining that they want to be traded. We just don't see it a lot with the Red Sox, but I honestly forgot Blake Swihart was even on the Red Sox. I thought that he was still in Pawtucket. But if Blake Swihart wants to get out of Boston, perform in Boston, because that's the only way Dave Dombrowski's going to trade, because there's enough on the trash heap that he can trade. But trading Blake Swihart right now isn't going to get you anything in return, along with a lot of the other players, because some of these younger players, the prospects, they're all gone now.
Well, now we can bring it up to the next topic here.
Your favorite?
What do we do with Jackie Bradley Jr.? I want to get rid of Jackie Bradley Jr. I think they should trade him. Maybe you can somewhat package him with Blake Swihart and get maybe a bullpen arm in there, because we've seen now Matt Barnes is starting to struggle a little bit in that bullpen. But what should the Red Sox do with Jackie Bradley Jr.?
At this point, you might have to trade him for that bullpen arm, because if Matt Barnes is having his issues, Carson Smith is an idiot and threw his arm out after being overused, only throwing 14 innings or something like that in 2 years. Maybe you do have to pull the trigger at some point here with Jackie Bradley Jr. You have Brock Holt that can play the outfield, or you have Blake Swihart. He wants to get out of Boston so bad, throw him in the outfield. He can be an outfielder, but I think this might have to be the stretch where Dave Dombrowski pulls a trigger, trade Jackie Bradley Jr., maybe trade a second piece, try and get a bullpen arm, kind of like what they've gotten over the past couple of years. Brad Ziegler, they had the pitcher from New York, that's Addison Reed. Mm-hmm. They traded for him. So there's always been that relief pitcher that comes in July, June, that can bolster the bullpen and act as that 7th or 8th inning guy, which is something the Red Sox haven't had.
What I think would be great is if you're able to trade Jackie Bradley Jr., you've lost your center fielder. I think you can easily put either Mookie or Andrew Benintendi in center field, and then you can throw J.D. Martinez out in left field. And when you put J.D. Martinez out there in left field, guess what? You've now opened up a spot in the lineup for Mitch Moreland to be a permanent factor there. Because don't forget, last offseason, Mitch Moreland was your big get for the Red Sox. Now he's kind of an afterthought, and he's crushing the ball. If you get rid of Jackie Bradley Jr., then you can actually put those guys in the rotation, and what I mean by rotation is the batting order, with some consistency and actually get good production out of your offense. We'll talk quickly about the pitching staff here, John. Chris Sale has actually had a pretty good season. Rick Porcello's had a good season. We know that David Price is an absolute freaking head case. Stephen Wright's actually done a half-decent job coming out of the bullpen. So do you think we're starting to see the starting pitching at least kind of come around now for this team and kind of get settled in their roles?
I think to a point, Porcello was kind of up and down for a little bit. But David Price, I feel like he's been the X factor of the Red Sox. If he can pitch and pitch well, the Red Sox are fine. He threw a complete game, 2 earned run performance there. I think 3/4, if not more, of his pitches were for strikes. He was dominant on the mound. If he can pitch like that, then the pitching staff is going to be back in line. There was a while I feel like the pitching staff just kind of had this game in the locker room. Who can outperform who? If you can eventually get back to that, the offense will be back in line. The warm weather will be coming in, so the ball will be flying out of Fenway. Eventually, the Red Sox will be back to the team that performed at 17-2 instead of this 15-13 hot and cold team.
Well, you know what the great thing is about this now? And we'll move on to our next topic, is that the United States Supreme Court has now allowed sports betting to be legal if the states so choose to do it. Now you can bet on this stuff, John. Are you excited that sports betting now could potentially be legal now in Massachusetts?
I mean, that would certainly kind of bolster up the odds in the Kentucky Derby there. I think this is something that could prove to be interesting for the state of Massachusetts, because you've kind of had betting going on. I feel like that's illegal, but I feel like this is something the state can really benefit from, and having a chance to have good teams like the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Patriots. If you can capitalize on that and have the viewership and realize I can just go down to the Quickie Mart and go ahead and bet on the Red Sox to take the over, you're going to drive up the viewership locally. You're going to drive up the revenue, depending on how that's going to be split. You're going to drive up interest in the game. I feel like betting, as weird as it sounds, is actually going to help the way we view a lot of the sports.
And you know what? This is really going to help out the companies like FanDuel and DraftKings, because I know they've been getting inundated with a lot of these lawsuits that you're technically a gambling institution, and Now I think that's going to clear up a lot of the air, and I think what's really going to help out a lot of people, and if you can do it correctly, is you're going to see apps now where you can bet your money through your phone, and that can help out great, if you bet, here and there, but there's going to be people on there every day for hours on end, just betting on anything and everything that they can do. But I think if you can do it in moderation, you have obviously your regulation. I think this really can be a great beneficial factor to sports.
And Adam Silver is actually for this. I think it was a couple of years ago. He went overseas to a soccer game or soccer match in London, and he saw that there were areas that you could bet actually in the stadium. He wanted that in the NBA at least 2 years ago. So he knows where this is going. I feel like MLB knows where this is going. NFL and NHL, they're kind of hesitant because the one thing I feel like this opens up is a possibility of a Pete Rose situation, where you go ahead and bet on yourself. And if you're bringing that up, do you bring up, does he go into the Hall of Fame now that sports betting is legal?
I don't think so, because, and this is obviously another topic for another day, but just real quick, it was illegal back then. But So, we talked some Red Sox, talked some Celtics, good stuff. And now we have one more thing to do, but we're going to take a break first. We're going to have our final thoughts right after the break. Don't go anywhere more. Out of bounds.
My name is Roosevelt. I always thought that cigarette smoking just messed up your lungs. I never thought that at only 45 would give me a heart attack. I never thought that it would stop me from playing basketball with my kids. Never thought that it would give me a scar like this. And I never thought that it would change my life forever. My tip is, do your heart a favor and quit now.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. That one day, I would make people smile.
Welcome back to Out of Bounds, alongside with John Luck. I'm Brian Berard. It's time for our final thoughts. So, John, go ahead.
I was going to bring up sports betting, but we already talked about that.
Yeah, well, it happens.
So, it's interesting. You look at a player like J.J. Watt, and the first thing you think about is this is a guy that's injury prone. He wore the stupid Letterman jacket to the Thursday night game against the Patriots. But I was doing some researching online. J.J. Watt is probably one of the most charitable players that you'll see, and it makes you appreciate what he does with his fame. Of course, we all know about the tragedy that took place in Texas, the shooting at Santa Fe High School that killed 10 people, including a teacher. He's offered to pay for their funerals. And this isn't the first time he's done something like this. You go back to Hurricane Harvey, 50 to 54 inches of rain fell in the Houston area. He raised $37 million in relief efforts. We talk about how sports is kind of the therapy for real life situations. We talk about 9/11. You talk about school shootings as well. Sometimes sports is something that can take your mind off it for 2.5 or 3 hours. It's great to see a player like J.J. Watt step up, use his fame, use his money, because this isn't the first time he's helped out victims of a school shooting. Back in 2012, we all remember the Sandy Hook massacre. He invited kids to come down to Houston, paid for their airfare, paid for a hotel, invited them to come down for a fun couple of days to take their mind off of what they went through. It would be great to see athletes use their fame, use their money. We see players nowadays that collect their $25, $30 million a year, go to their house in California and shelter up for a couple months. But J.J. Watt has been the exception, and he continues to be the exception. And it's great to see a pro athlete that makes $100 million in a 6-year span use his fame, use his popularity, use his money to help out those that are having maybe the most rough time in their lives.
J.J. Watt's an awesome person. When you play him on the field, you sit there and you go, God, I hate him, he's so good. And then you see the stuff that he does off the field, it's amazing. But So I'm going to stick locally here. Just a quick little shout out. Doug Alves of the Bridgewater Rainham boys basketball team is named the Brockton Enterprise Boys Basketball Player of the Year. That's a pretty cool honor for him. One of the few 1,000-point scorers in BR history. And of course, BR softball team, they are really on a roll right now. They've qualified for the Division I South Sectional Tournament. Of course, BTV will be filming their game against Franklin at Bridgewater Rainham on Wednesday night. So some cool stuff for some local athletes. So once again, for John Luck, I'm Brian Berard. Thanks for watching Out of Bounds.